up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college basketball week 6 top 25. As always, I have Ty joining me, breaking down this week's top 25 teams. But before we get into it, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Get us 200. We're only 5 subscribers away from that giveaway of an autographed item, memorabilia, whatnot. So all you have to do to enter is just hit that subscribe button. But we'll jump into the video here. But we first got to talk about who's dropping. And Ty, I'll let you take it away here. Which one of these teams is kind of the most disappointing falling from our rankings?
I think you got to point to Creighton after their basically rise into the top five at the start of the year. Really good showing in Maui, and now it's just been just a free fall. Basically, I don't know what's going on there, but that Nebraska loss stands out as a really ugly one, sandwiched between two other losses. So back to the drawing board for them. I think they'll be fine, but expectations might not be the same now as they were earlier.
And then you go to the others receiving votes, and this is where it gets interesting. You got 4 completely different teams that were on this list that weren't on this list last week, with Miami and Memphis getting some big wins. Miami's 10-1, Memphis a big win. Marquette has been a very not underwhelming, but underrated team so far. Iowa State obviously just fell out, and then Arizona State has shown flashes of possibly being a Pac-12 contender. So all these teams are interesting to look out for, but we'll jump into our rankings. And yes, we do have the Charleston Cougars ranked in the Colonial Conference at 10-1 this year. And, their only blemish was losing by 16 to UNC at UNC when they were still really good. Take it how you will, but they did beat Davidson and Virginia Tech, who is also ranked in this week's video. But you got to like where this team is going. Maybe they're going to be this year's Gonzaga, really just easily breeze through the conference, get 25, 30 wins possibly, and coast to an easy tournament berth.
Yeah, 24, we have Wisconsin, a team who didn't really have any expectations this year, lost a lot last year, but they've been playing really well. Last night, a really good road win at Iowa. And I was watching that game. Iowa stormed back last minute, somehow sent it to overtime. I thought this game is over, but Wisconsin battled back and got the win on the road. So I think it's just a typical Wisconsin team. They're not going to score a lot, but they play really good defense. They don't turn the ball over, and they have guys who can make plays in big moments like Chucky Hepburn and Tyler Wall. So I think they'll be a mainstay in the rankings for the most part.
23, we got the Buckeyes staying put, and this is the closest they will probably be to almost falling out all year, because if they would have lost that game to Rutgers, they would definitely be out. But they hit that miraculous three-pointer that Big Ten officials said probably shouldn't have counted after the fact because he was out of bounds, came back in bounds, first player to touch it. Shouldn't count, but unfortunately a missed call. But in the moment, I mean, how do you call that? I feel like that's a really hard thing to do. But you got to give him credit. He still made the shot and whatnot. So they're 7-2, get their first win in Big Ten play. But now they face UNC, who's looking for that big win because they need it really bad. And I think if UNC gets that win in New York, then maybe they're going to swap positions here. Ohio State's out and UNC's jumping back in. But they're going to need Zed Key to just keep dominating like he has been doing so far this year.
And Virginia Tech jumps back in, a really underrated team here at 10-1. Haven't really played a really difficult schedule, but they had some good wins in their tournament in November, and then a good win over North Carolina. So I think they are still going to be towards the top of the ACC. Another team that plays really good defense, and I think they're going to really fly below the radar this year because they're not the most exciting team to watch, but they're going to be really good.
21, I have Maryland, and they had a very bad week last week. 2 road losses to Wisconsin and Tennessee. Obviously, both those teams are ranked. That just shows you that maybe there's some frauds here. 2 big, obviously ranked matchups, and you kind of sputter at the fact. But now you get one at home, you get UCLA at home, and you really need to win this one to really prove it, not to just us, but prove it to the country that you can hang with those top teams.
We got Illinois dropping to 20. Really interesting week for them. Really huge win over Texas, who was ranked number 2 at the time. So at that point, they're looking like a top 10, maybe even top 5 team. And then they come home and just get ran out of their own building by Penn State. So I think that's a big head scratcher. I know Penn State was pretty hot shooting the ball, but either way, that's a really bad loss. And I think it was a product of a big win and Illinois just having a big letdown not really focusing on that Penn State game. And we've seen that over the last few years from them. They can be really up and down, play to the level of their competition. So they'll have to turn it around because they're 0-2 in Big Ten play.
19, TCU's making a jump up 5 spots. They took care of Jackson State and SMU, no problems there. And I think this team could throw their hat in the ring in the Big 12 in the favorite list, just because really no one has started to pull away yet. Obviously, they lost their first game of the year in a very ugly fashion, big upset to start the year, and obviously they're 8-0 since. So the Horned Frogs obviously learned from their mistakes early and should probably beat Mississippi Valley State by at least 30. They're 1-8 this year, very awful team. So expect TCU to be 9-1 next week.
At 18, we got Mississippi State. This is the most underrated, undefeated team I've seen in a long time because I know they haven't played a super tough schedule, but they passed the eye test. They've had a lot of really dominant wins. Last night they went into Minnesota, who's not a great team, but they handled their business, won by, I think it was 15. So I know they're not playing the stiffest of competition, but they're not exactly struggling with these teams either. They should have 2 more wins this week. And I think they're going to be a team that can be really dangerous in the SEC, which might be the best conference in basketball this year.
17, Indiana's moving back just a little bit. They get a big win in Big Ten play to beat Nebraska, but then they lose in Vegas to Arizona by 14. So realistically, you couldn't really move them down too much after they got their first Big Ten win. But Trayce Jackson-Davis is going to have to be the guy in this big matchup against Kansas. If they can go in there and beat Kansas, then maybe this team might be trending upwards to a top 10 ranking next week just because of how high we have Kansas in our rankings. But it's going to come down to the freshman, Xavier Johnson. He's going to have to step up and have at least 15 points, I think, to really give Indiana a chance to upset Kansas.
We got Gonzaga moving up 1 spot here to number 16. Struggled with Kent State, only won by 7, which normally would be a panic button game, but Kent State's actually a very good mid-major this year. So I think you can give them a little bit of a pass there. And they also dominated Washington. So overall, 2-0 week, getting back on track. And if they can get a win in that Alabama game this week, that'll be their last big test before conference play. So, if they can get through that, I think they might only lose maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 games the rest of the season. I know the West Coast Conference is getting a little better, but that's still Gonzaga's conference. They own that. So I still expect them to pretty much dominate the rest of the season, and they should be a top 4 seed in March Madness.
And at 15, Auburn's dropping 5 spots. And this was just because the team struggled against Memphis, had a lot of 3-point attempts, but only made 25% of them. They're only shooting 66.7% as a team from the free throw line. So that's a stat that you really need to go up if you really want to win some close games, especially when conference play is about to start. So they're going to have to improve from the foul line for sure. And that USC game is going to be, I think, a game that people might overlook when they play them this weekend. USC is a decent team, 7-3 right now as we're making this video. Auburn obviously kind of surprising us a little bit here, really just kind of staying pace to where we thought they would be. But KD Johnson, I think, is going to have to step up just a little more than he has been giving right now. Really get the ball in the cup a little bit here. And Auburn's going to have to find a few different ways to get things done here early in the season.
All right, 14, we have UCLA, a team a lot of people forgot about. They lost 2 games in a row. I think it was to Baylor and Virginia, if I remember correctly, at the start of the year. Some combination of those 2 in Illinois. And a lot of people just completely forgot about them, but now they're back at 8-2. They haven't lost since then, and they've been dominating some subpar competition. But this week they go to Maryland and they play Kentucky on a neutral court. So now they have their chance to bounce back and prove that they have really improved since that rough go of it back in November. A lot of returning talent from not only last year, but also from that Final Four team 2 years ago in Jaime Jaquez and Jalen Clark. So I think they're still going to be a really, really good team, but they're going to have to prove to people that they are here to stay this week.
13, we got Kentucky, who UCLA will be playing in New York. This team, is really kind of coasting, I would say, right now. I know that they haven't even started SEC play, so we're really going to see what this Kentucky team is made of. But if they go to New York and beat UCLA, go 8-2, and then start SEC play, I think this Kentucky team will be legit. Oscar Tshiebwe, obviously, he's pretty much a candidate for Player of the Year. Antonio Reeves has been off to a very hot start as well. And John Calipari, obviously this team is going to be a tournament team unless, something happens here to this Kentucky team where they just can't win a game. But they're going to have to, exercise their demons essentially like they did, from last year because, losing in the first round of St. Peter's, obviously they went on that magical run, but for a Kentucky team and how good they were last year, it just was a big disappointment. And if something like that happens again coming up in the tournament, obviously it's a few months from now, but you got to talk about it early just because it's got to stay fresh in their minds just so they have that motivation to not have that happen again.
At number 12, we have Duke, a team that's really been kind of coasting throughout December so far. They have that big win over Iowa. I think a lot of people thought it might be a down year by Duke standards after that Kansas loss to start the season. Obviously, you pair that with Coach K leaving last year, and expectations might have went down a little bit after that. But now they're back at 10-2. I think they look like a top 10 team right now, and they'll have a chance to prove it starting an ACC play. But they have a very good chance to win that league. Obviously, Virginia's right there, but I think they're going to have a very good chance if they can even split with Virginia this year.
11, Baylor's moving up 2 spots. Obviously they have one of the best trio guard combos in the country with Flagler, Cryer, and George. Obviously, Cryer and Flagler, you can see their stats on the screen there, really making this team go. They face Washington State, should easily beat them. And I think Baylor, is another team that it seems like they're starting to assert their dominance here in college basketball, always being a top 10 team under the Scott Drew era.
And into the top 10 is Arizona now. Really good win over Indiana, a dominant win in Vegas. And I think this would be potentially a number 1 team in the country if they didn't have that really ugly loss to Utah, because they'd be 9-0 with a couple really good wins. And this week they have a chance for another one as they take on number 7 Tennessee. And this team is just rolling on offense. This is how they were last year. Lost a lot of talent, but they reloaded. Omar Ballo was the backup center last year, and he's pretty much stepped in and done everything they've asked him to do and more, scoring 19 a game already. Wasn't much of a scorer last year, so I think his improvement is going to be key down the stretch for Arizona as they have another go-to big guy this year.
At 9, we have Texas, and obviously you want to talk about their loss to Illinois, but then, with the news coming out this morning about Chris Beard getting arrested for third-degree assault of a family member, obviously that's tough to not talk about there. But, we don't want to talk about that too much because obviously that's a whole don't know enough yet on that situation. But we'll talk about the team and how they responded after that loss. They came out and blew Arkansas Pine Bluff back to wherever they're from, beat them by 45 points. Tyrese Hunter has been great. Marcus Carr still not getting enough love I think that he deserves in the country, not just at Texas. And, they should have 2 easy win games this week, but is it an easy win just because of how good the team is? Or, now with the situation, the drama, whatever you want to call it, that's surrounding Texas, how easy are these games actually going to be? Are the players going to be really focused and motivated to get it done? Or are they going to get caught up in it as well and lose focus? Now, we're going to find that out tonight, actually, because they're playing Rice Monday night. So we might see this Texas Longhorn team take a big dip next week, or they could be staying put and taking care of business.
And at number 8, we have Arkansas. Really good win over Oklahoma this week. I know they're not exactly a top 25 team, but it's still a good win, still good Power 5 win for the resume. This week they get Bradley, so they should be 10-1. But this team is very, very young. The fact that they're already playing at this high of a level is really scary, to be honest, going forward. I think they're going to be really dangerous in the SEC. And I think come March, they might be the best team in that really good conference just because of how young they are. And they're already starting to see big improvements out of the freshmen. So give them a couple months. This is going to be a really dangerous team.
At 7, Tennessee's moving up 2 spots. And this is because, well, they beat Maryland, okay, but they only beat them by 3 after they were up 17 points at half. So that's a big cause of concern there for Tennessee. But hey, a win is a win, especially this early in the season. And it's a great out-of-conference win as well. Obviously, Maryland, we still have them ranked. So hopefully it's good for their resume when it comes down to the end of the season. But I think this Saturday is going to be the biggest statement, possibly win if they can get it for this Volunteer team before SEC play starts. If you go into Arizona, be the top 10 team, more than likely this team will be a top 5 team next week. And it's going to have to come down to Vescovi. Is he going to be able to be the guy down low and take care of business, or is he going to get kind of bullied around and Arizona's going to have their way? So if you're going to be watching this game, that's the matchup you want to look for. And I think the Volunteers can do it. It's just going to have to run through him.
And falling to number 6 is the Houston Cougars. They looked a little vulnerable the last few weeks leading up to this game against Alabama, and they really let this one slip away at the end of the game. Alabama came into their building, got the win. And Houston, they definitely had revenge on their minds because that game ended controversially last year in Alabama, and they just couldn't get it done this year. So it's back to the drawing board this week. They get right back into it at number 1 Virginia. I mean, as tough as a game as you can get. I think this team is really going to learn a lot about themselves. How do they come back off a loss playing against another really good team? I still think they are probably going to be a top 2 or 3 seed in March, just given how weak their conference is. But they got to at least prove that they can compete with these really good teams.
At 5, we have the Alabama team that took care of business, beating Houston for the second year in a row. And now they have 2 tough matchups, a good Memphis team at home, and obviously Gonzaga is good as well at home. But I do think they're probably going to go 1-1 just because they're going to be coming off of that high against being the number 1 team in the country. I don't know who's going to beat them and who they're going to beat, but I just think that they're due for a slip up here after that big win. Obviously we saw Illinois do it last week, and I think Alabama is a candidate for that as well. But this team, maybe they're the SEC favorite at this point in the season. Who knows? You said it already in this video. SEC is probably the most loaded conference in basketball this year, just like they normally are in football. We're gonna have to see if this Bama team can really compete, because I mentioned it before we started the video to you that they always play to the other team's level of competition, and they did it last year. We've kind of seen some glimpses of them doing it this year. But, if they have a lot of tough opponents, then I think that benefits them because they'll always be playing their best. So we're just going to have to see how good this Alabama team is, see if that was a really fluke game that they played really good in, or if that's really the Bama team we're going to get all year long.
And we got Kansas jumping up to number 4. Absolutely blew out Missouri on the road. Missouri was undefeated. They were 9-0. So that is a really impressive win. They win by 28 on the road. So I think that really puts Kansas right back towards the top of the country, maybe even as the best team right now. Purdue's ranked number 1 in the AP poll. I, for one, would take Kansas on a neutral court against Purdue. So I think it might be fair to say they're the best team. They're also the defending champs. So they have a lot going for them. Really good freshman and Grady Dick going along with some really good experience in Jalen Wilson. So I think this is still a really dangerous team, even after losing a lot last year. And, they have to be the favorite in the Big 12, I would think.
At 3, we have those Purdue Boilermakers, and we couldn't just put them at number 1 because they're probably the best team or close to best team on paper. They just beat Nebraska in overtime at Nebraska, and that's causes some concern for me. This Purdue team with Zach Edey, they're supposed to dominate everyone and just kind of run through the conference, maybe go 17-3 at worst. But if they're going to play games like this, that's a big cause for concern, because if Edey gets into foul trouble, then what are you going to do? Because, he pretty much is the team, it seems like this year. Obviously you can see his stats there. He's averaging 22 points and almost 14 rebounds a game. And then the next closest is 13 points and so on, and then you don't have a guy that's over double digits for scoring. So those 2 guys right there on the screen are going to be the guys that are going to have to keep this team afloat. And if either of them get into foul trouble, then it could be trouble brewing for these Boilermakers. But they should get a win at home against a very good Davidson team, but don't be too surprised if they keep that one close.
And at number 2, we have the UConn Huskies. They've been unbeatable. I mean, to start the year, just to put it lightly, they blew out Florida by 21 on the road, blew out Long Island by 50, and they've won every single game by double digits this year. So I think they are another team with an argument to be the best team in the country. I mean, unlike Kansas, they haven't lost a game. So I think they might have the best argument right now just because of how dominant they've been in every game. You just said Purdue's had that overtime game. UConn hasn't had a game like that. and they might not have played the same schedule as Purdue, but they were in that Phil Knight Invitational out in Portland, ran through that, won 3 games, and they have a win over Alabama. So that's a really good win right now. And I think this team is just going to impose its will on a lot of teams in the Big East. This isn't like a December peak for them. I think they're going to be a really good team all year.
And at 1, we have Virginia moving up to the top spot. And maybe they shouldn't be number 1 right now. Maybe they have to earn it this week against the win against Houston at home. But, this team has been the biggest surprise, I think, of the year. We had them ranked pretty high compared to the AP poll and coaches poll. But here they are already in the top 3 in all the polls, and obviously number 1 at ours. So I think this team really is going to be a great team. Another thing is they play Miami next week. So that's on the road for ACC play. So that'll be a tough game too. So they have a 2-game stretch here where they could possibly lose these games. But if they win both those, then maybe this team is legit. But it came at a cost in that James Madison game, losing Reese Beckman with a hamstring injury. No really update on that yet. Could he be out for a while, or if he's, good to go for the Saturday tilt against Houston? But you got to like this Tony Bennett-led team. Virginia, they do it every year. They're always top 10, top 20, besides one down year. And I like where this team's going. My pick at the beginning of the year to win the ACC before the season even started, I thought this was my dark horse team. They're looking pretty good right now. But knock on wood that this team is kind of going to stay pace. But obviously, you got to give them credit where credit is due. But that's going to be it for our video this week. Make sure you guys come back next week to see if your team made the cut, or if they're changing their ranking as well. But hit that subscribe button, get us to 200 so we can do that giveaway. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.